Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be here. So, as Paul said, I work in a collective behaviour research group, and we're interested in all forms of collective behaviour, how individuals interact with each other to produce patterns. So, a lot of our research is about animal groups. It's about fish and ants and birds, but we're also interested in humans who have interest in collective behaviour too, and even things down at the cellular level, how cells interact to produce different patterns. And what I really like about coming here and speaking at Google is that a few years ago I got really inspired by your 20% idea that you should do something else with your research time other than the stuff that you're doing. And of course, I mean, I already look at like animal groups, and so that's a load of fun. But I thought, what could we do? And so in our research group, we started to try and do a bit of this 20% thing. We had a Fun Friday, we called it, where we tried to do some other type of research. And connected to all of that, I came up with the idea, wouldn't it be fun to try and apply how I look at collective behaviour of animals to looking at collective behaviour in football? And that's really where the origin of the idea of Soccermatics came from. To give you an idea of the sorts of things I study, here are 3 videos. At the bottom, this is some clapping undergraduate students. We did a study on how applause starts and stops after people have listened to a talk, a bit like this type of talk. On the top is the formation of ant trails. It's a bit faint there, but what's shown is, in a little pinkish colour, is where the ants have been and where they're leaving pheromone trails. Ants communicate with chemicals and they build up trails between their nest and food. And at the top right there, that is tracks of fish movements. So that's a small group of 8 fish, how they're moving around, and we can work out how they interact with each other. So that's really the everyday type of research we do. I'm going to go into a little bit of more details of these things later on, but that's to give you an idea of the types of collective behaviour that we study. So, coming to Soccermatics. So Soccermatics has a lot of chapters about different ideas from biology where we can apply it to football. And one of the first ones I came up with was slime moulds and Barcelona. So, and the title of the chapter is How Slime Moulds Built Barcelona. And first I should introduce you to the slime mould. Some of you might have seen slime moulds before. Here is a slime mould. And what we can see here, this is a particular experiment done by Toshi Nakagaki and his colleagues. And the slime mould is the yellow thing in the middle. On the white things are oat flakes that he's left lying out. And he's actually left them lying out in the shape of Tokyo suburbs. So this is the airport in Tokyo. This is the center of Tokyo. This is Yokohama down here. And all of the suburbs of Tokyo have been left out as cornflakes. And what the slime mold does is it spreads out and connects up all of these different suburbs. And it does so in a very nice, optimal way. It makes these nice triangulation patterns where it can transport all the nutrients backwards and forwards between the center of it and all of these different areas. So slime molds are singular cellular organisms, yet they can solve these quite difficult transportation problems. And the nice thing that Toshi and his colleagues did is that they said, well, can we compare how the humans solved this problem and how the slime molds solved it? And it turns out that the slime molds came up with pretty much a smart solution to the Tokyo network problem as the humans did. And so they were able to solve it and produce these minimal spanning trees or these connecting networks that were somehow very close to what the humans managed to do. And they also tested this, I like this story, because they also tested this for Germany, and it was the same result. It was very efficient. In France, they connected up the network. Then they looked at the British rail system and how the slime mold compared to the humans, and it came up with a much better solution. The slime mold was much better than the British rail solution. Okay, so how do slime molds connect to Barcelona? Right, well, let's start by looking at a goal. This is one of the greatest football teams of all time. This is the Barcelona team of 2010-2011, which won the Champions League. And this, of course, is Lionel Messi. 1 pass, 2 pass, and into goal. It's just an amazing run where he basically goes past 8 players and gets the ball into the back of the net. It's just, well, it's just wonderful to watch. But what I wanted to do is, well, think about what's actually going on there. I mean, when you're looking at this, you're probably looking mostly at Messi. But there's a very interesting thing if we look at some of the other players. So now I've tracked the positions of all of the players and I've put them down onto the football pitch. And we can see that Messi is over there. And Xavi is over here. And then we have Iniesta here. And what I've done is made a triangulation very similar to what happens with the slime molds, connecting all of these players. And you see this really lovely triangulation between Xavi here and Iniesta, and you have the opposing players are sort of caught in the middle. And Xavi is perfectly placed between these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 other players. He's right in the middle of them. And by moving into the middle, at the same time, he produces a triangle where he can then take the ball from Messi and pass it on to the next player. So we can actually break this down as a Voronoi diagram and see that the opposing players are stuck on the line between Xavi and Messi, which makes it very easy for him to do the pass. Then what does Messi do next? Well, this is Pedro. Just now he's standing marked by another player. But 1 second later, when Messi has moved forward, you see suddenly that Pedro is standing in the middle of 1, 2, 3, 4. It's just a subtle movement, just 1 meter away, produces the same triangular effect again. And this is what Barcelona do time after time after time. They create space, and through creating space, they create these triangles which they can pass. Once Pedro has done that, the ball goes to Pedro, and this is just in a 1 meter space, and Messi is through. And so when we watch it again, we see pass 1, pass 2, Pedro moved into space, and the goal goes in. So that was the whole structure between that particular Barcelona team. Now I've been working with data. I've been writing articles for 442 magazine and working with data from Opta. And now we can actually look at the whole passing network throughout a match. So this is Barcelona versus Arsenal. This is now modern day Barcelona. This was this season match where they knocked Arsenal out of the Champions League. And again, we can see very nice selection of triangles between Messi on this side and Dani Alves and Rakitic. And then up at the top, we have Neymar, Iniesta, and Alba. And what I love about the Barcelona network, it just has this sort of perfect symmetry. You basically have Messi and 2 players, you have Neymar and 2 players, you have Busquets, which you can go back to, and then you have Suarez at the tip of it all, and there's a sort of symmetry down the middle. And by looking at the passes that all of the players made, you can identify what are the key components of Barcelona, what makes them such a successful team. And I've been doing, I got really into this. When I got hold of this Opta data, it was so much fun to make all of these different passing networks. This is a different type of passing network I've made. This is from earlier in the season, Manchester City versus Leicester. And this is a passing network which shows the average pass position between different players. So up here is the average place that Sterling passed to Kolarov. This is the average place Kolarov passed off to Sterling. And then we can build up a convex hull which connects all of these passing points. And you get an idea of where is the territory for these different places. And it's interesting to see that Sterling plays basically across the two wings. And this is something that Manchester City do. So you can get a very nice idea which goes above the normal formations of a football match of how a team works together. So that's the basic network connection and the starting with a slime mold. The next thing that I wanted to look at was the flow of the game. So there's a chapter in the book called Check My Flow. And the starting point for this was an experiment done by Messi Mercedes. He did a very simple experiment, but it's a very nice and useful experiment. He did it in France, and he had 2 students. So one of them stood here, and the other student was walking towards the stationary student. And what this vector field shows you, what all the arrows show you, is the effect that a stationary student has on a moving student. And so it's taken away, they've always got forward motion, but you can see they slow down when they're in this area. And if they're off to the left, they go off to the left, and if they're off to the right, they go off to the right. And he actually found that there was a small bias, maybe a sort of 60-40 bias, that these arrows are just a bit stronger off to the right. So there's a sort of bigger tendency to go off to the right. And this means when you have two walking students who meet each other, they end up passing each other on the right. And so this is a nice example of how you can model individual interactions in humans and work out what's going on. So what I wanted to do was use this type of vector field, this type of flow field approach, in order to understand what's going on in a football match. This is another one of my very favorite players. Up here is Andrea Pirlo. He's just got the ball here, and he puts it across. So watch what Pirlo does now. He sort of strolls around. He has this beautiful style of he doesn't even look like he can run properly. He kind of moves over there. He sort of strolls around with the ball a little bit like this. Oh, I've fallen over. No, I'm not really going to do anything. Yeah, I'll just stand here for a bit. And then pang, he just places this beautiful pass out to free player, one more pass, and then the ball's suddenly in the middle, and it's a goal. This was the semi-final of the Euro 2012. And that's really Pirlo's mode of operation. He was one of the key players in that game. Time and time again, he was in the middle of the field, standing there and then putting out these passes in different directions. And what I can do is I can produce this same type of flow field for Pirlo. And I like to call him the eye of the storm, because basically he has this operation area. This is a heat map of where he's most often passing from. And if he's on the right-hand side, he tends to pass out to the left, which he did in the video we saw. And if he's on the left, he passes out to the right. And that's his operation. He's really tightly constrained to a particular point and making these passes out in a different direction. This is the average data. Well, I've fitted a model to this, but it's the average data taken over a match. And then you can compare to other players. So Schweinsteiger plays for Germany. And you would actually say that in that match, he played the same midfield position as Pirlo, but he has a completely different vector field or flow field. He is moving everywhere around the pitch. He has these long passes in this direction, some going out that direction, and he moves much more around. So I think if Pirlo is the eye of the storm, then Schweinsteiger is a tornado that just engulfs the whole pitch. And what I like about this is there's sort of like an analogy here, or there's a sort of prediction. It's like a weather forecast prediction. If we look at that, well, now we've got a forecast of how Schweinsteiger is going to play. And this is exactly how he played in the World Cup final. He was everywhere in the World Cup final 2 years later. And I don't think he single-handedly won the World Cup final, but he was one of the absolute key players in doing it. So you sort of have a weather forecast which predicts how a player will play in future matches. And what's been nice to do now looking at this Opta data is to do this for players. So this is Riyad Mahrez, who's been one of the successful players for Leicester this season. He plays out on the right midfield. And you can see exactly where Mahrez is. You know, this is where he's going to be, that black thing. And you can also see where he's passing the ball. This shows why he's so effective. The ball keeps flowing in this direction. This is where Vardy is, for example. All of his passes are creating chances going in that direction. And you can use this technique to compare different players. Because we're in London, because we're in London, you're probably all Manchester United fans. But I thought I'd show you some of the leading attacking midfielders for the London teams. So Eden Hazard for Chelsea up there, Mesut Ozil for Arsenal, Christian Eriksen for Spurs, and Dimitri Payet for West Ham. And ostensibly these players play around about the same position, but they have very different attacking arrows. Eden Hazard has had a really bad season, and you can sort of see why. If you compare to Ozil on the right here, Ozil's passes are always moving forward in this direction, while Eden Hazard is passing more into the middle, so he's not making the ball move forward. Christian Eriksen is doing a pretty good job at making the ball move forward. And Payet is doing very long passes. These are crosses into the box. And so he's moving the ball in a good direction. So you can get an idea of the style of play of the different players and whether they're effective in this play. Okay, so up to now, I've been looking at on-the-ball data. I've been looking at when the player has the ball, where is the player moving the ball to. But there's more and more technology available now to actually track all of the movement of all of the players. This data is collected by individuals, by people watching the match and saying who's got the ball and tracking the positions on the pitch. But it is actually possible to automatically track all of the positions of the players. This is the kind of interesting problem that I'm sure you guys are interested in at Google. And so I have a chapter on the world in motion, I call it. And that's where I really like to think about what we've done in our own fish research. So this is a film from a BBC documentary showing really some of the most beautiful patterns that fish create. And I thought I'd give you an idea about how they work in the wild before we move into the lab. So these are the sort of balls of mackerel and other fish you see if you go diving. And they create these massive balls of movement. And the point is that no individual fish has any idea of the pattern that it's creating as a whole. They're just moving around, following their local neighbours, yet they're producing these incredibly intricate and complicated patterns. And one of the big steps forward when we wanted to model these things mathematically was just the simple idea of looking at what we call self-propelled particle models. The idea is that you have this particle here, and it just follows the direction of the other particles around it. So if I allow this red particle to just follow the direction of the black particle, and it just starts to move forward in this. And then I can take and simulate the whole thing. So now I'm just running this on, so if they go off one boundary, they come back onto the other. And you can see our red focal fish. But what is really cool here is you've just got this local interaction that's shown by the grey area. And quite quickly, you get a sort of something that doesn't look so different from a fish school. You have movement in the same direction, you have groups moving around, and it has that same kind of complex motion. So just from a very simple rule of following your neighbours, you can create a fish school that moves in the same direction. And when we do this in the lab, we study exactly this. As I showed the film before, we're tracking the individual fish, and we want to work out what are the rules of motion that these fish are following. Another example is here. This is an escape experiment. We frighten the fish, and we can watch a wave of escape going through them. We can't do these massive experiments like they do in the wild, but we can get a nice idea of how the fish are interacting. And for quite a few years now, we've been doing what we call rules of motion experiments. We look at how this focal fish interacts with its neighbours. This is an example of how a fish accelerates depending on the position of its neighbours. This is a similar thing done with pigeons. How does a pigeon change direction as a function of the position of its neighbours? And we can get a really good idea of how these fish and how these pigeons interact with each other. And recently, to try and prove how good we were at this, we did what we call the fish Turing test. The job for you now is to spot the real fish and the non-real fish as they swim around in this arena. And actually, I think I have to confess that I have forgotten the answer to which is the real fish and which is the... And so we did an experiment, and the real fish experts could tell slightly better than random between simulated fish and real fish. But we found that members of the public were unable to distinguish real fish and simulated fish. So we're pretty close to there's always more interesting problems with fish, but we're pretty close to having a nice solution of how fish interact with each other. But that gives the nice thing of having a new challenge, and that's football. So this is a 8 against 8 match. the pitch is a bit complicated here because they're playing on half a pitch, so they've got the goal here and the goal there. And so these pitch markings are just because they're playing on half the pitch. They're playing from left to right. And if you looked at the green team, that shows the correlations between the players, how closely they're moving together. When they're green, they're correlated well. And suddenly, when the yellow team get the ball, they switch from being highly correlated to blue, which is what happens when you attack. Then you become unsynchronized. They've lost the ball again, and then they become green, which means that they're highly correlated. And you can actually look to see which player is following which in these systems. That's the pointiness of the arrows. And what we've identified there is defense is a synchronized movement, and attack is basically about making more random, unexpected movements. This is kind of preliminary work. This is a particular test data set that we have. And this is really the stuff that will be being done over the next 5 or 10 years, is trying to understand this type of data and to see if you can understand the basics of what happens in a football match and if we can think about how to improve it. We have a few ideas about this. One experiment we've done on the fish is we're interested in this idea of collective vision. What the colour here shows is what the white areas is things that all of the fish can see. The red areas are things that only 1 or 2 of the fish can see, areas of this thing. So we can get an idea about what the fish group can see. And that's exactly what we are interested in doing in a football match. This is another situation with Barcelona. And over on this side, I've tried to plot where are the possible passes that Busquets can make up over to Messi. And the red areas show things which are blocked, and the green areas show possible passes. And you can take, this was a student of mine, Emil Rosen, who did this work, and what you can do is you can take different match situations and you can say, this is James Milner in a match for Liverpool, and he basically has 2 passing options. He has one to try and get the ball through to Sturridge there, which is a much narrower chance, or he can play the ball out to the wing. And so you can evaluate these different match situations and say, when should you decide to make these certain things? It's much more valuable to make this type of pass because it's much more dangerous, but what's the probability of success? And you can show that to the players after the match and say, well, you decided to do that here, maybe you should make a different decision last time based on statistics. And that's where I think you can, this is where you have these beautifully big data sets which you can kind of learn on and decide, make good decision rules for football making. Good, so that's the collective motion. The last thing I'm going to just touch on for 5 minutes is what I call the tactical map. So this uses some of the ideas we've looked at so far and some extra things. And this one is not in the book because I wrote the book before the whole Leicester City phenomenon. But I decided quite early on that I had to look at this Leicester City thing and work out what was going on. And this is a nice picture of the defensive zones that Leicester City create. So they basically have 2 areas where they defend the ball. These shapes are the typical areas where Leicester City players recover the ball. They, of course, have a back 4, a very traditional back 4, Fuchs, Huth, Morgan and Simpson playing in the back 4. But he's a bit faint in this picture, but Kante, who's been one of their star players, he defends in front of the back 4, picking up the ball and then shooting it up to either to Mahrez or Vardy or Albrighton, who are then very effective in striking. But you see this territory at the back, and what Leicester have also been extremely good in doing is that they own this territory further up at the front, and they're often getting the ball back up here, which allows them to do very fast attacks. Or if the ball comes up from Kante, maybe Vardy doesn't get it first time, but he recovers it very quickly, and then they can continue to attack on goal. So you can see where the defensive territories are. And I did a study back in February looking at what is it that makes Leicester different from the other teams. And it turned out that if you break the pitch into XY coordinates and you look each pass, how far does it travel across the pitch and how far does it travel up the pitch during the time that they're passing, then this is across the pitch and this is up the pitch. Leicester City are off the charts with passes directly up the pitch. There are other teams which we call long ball teams like West Ham United, Crystal Palace and Southampton, they're doing crosses into the box, but Leicester are playing directly up the pitch. Before Leicester City, this was what was considered to be good quality football. That Arsenal, Manchester City, Liverpool are trying to do it, Chelsea, Manchester United, what they're doing is they've got the ball. They're passing very short passes to one another. They think that they've got the best players, and so they try and control with a lot of possession and a lot of fast passing to each other. And they did that this season. In previous seasons, it's been these teams that have won. But this season, by stepping exactly into this area, Leicester City seem to have been much more effective. One last thing I didn't say about this plot is that the size of the circle is the number of chances generated by the teams. So Arsenal had an incredible number of chances, but unfortunately they didn't have the strikers to score any of the goals. And Leicester City had less strikers, but they were less chances, but they were very effective in converting them. Then lastly, this is now a seasoned network of... Leicester were very nice because they have pretty much the same players on the pitch throughout the season. And so you can get a good idea of who was passing who. So the circle here is how many shots from the danger zone in front of goal were done by a particular player. So Vardy is this massive circle here. But even Huth is a pretty big circle. It doesn't mean he shot from there. He shot closer in. But this is the typical position that they passed from. And you can get an idea of how Leicester moved the ball around. Kante is this central point that's connecting up everybody. So again, you've got some sort of tool for analysing performance. I think I've been talking to a few different football clubs and people who are doing this type of data. And what's increasingly being done is that there's this integration. There will be an opposition analyst who will look at the passing of this type of data. Then they'll try and compare it to their own knowledge, and then this should go into the player has an iPad and is looking at the data and trying to improve their own play. There's training sessions which can be based on preparing for particular tactics that the team you're meeting is going to play against, and then the manager is of course doing their traditional presentation of the results. So I think this type of data is going to be more and more integrated into how football clubs work. Good. That was the main things I wanted to say, and so I'll just finish with that's 3 chapters of the book, so I'll just finish with a little plug for some of the other things. Some of the other chapters in the book, I look at, so I live in Sweden, and there Zlatan Ibrahimovic is the big hero, so I had to do an analysis of Zlatan Ibrahimovic, and I analysed the trajectory of his overhead lob goal kick against England from a couple of years ago. So that was a lot of fun to do that analysis. Then I have a little bit on game theory and strategy, and my point there is that by birds are able to evolve to have particular strategies, and managers are also able to evolve and have optimal strategies, possibly not by being the smartest people, but just by watching each other and adopting their strategies. And I talk about why you should have 3 points for a win, because it makes more attacking football. I have You'll Never Walk Alone is about crowd movement, and I look at applause and how applause is infectious, a bit like the clapping study we did, but also thinking about how songs start in a football ground. You have this really rapid spread of particular songs between people, and it's really to do with exponential growth and infection. Then I have a bit on collective wisdom, so how betting provides some form of collective wisdom. There was this lovely book, The Wisdom of Crowds, and so I look at it a bit deeper at some of the assumptions in the wisdom of crowds in that. And then I end the book by putting my money where my mouth is and try and beat the betting market using some of the things that I've learnt about football. And I did actually manage to make a little bit of money. You can read about it in the book. But it turned out that, there was two things. It turned out that it was a very boring strategy that made me lots of money. It was just to bet on draws. And also, so that wasn't so much fun. And also, I challenged my wife, who's sitting here, to the betting thing. And she claims that she had a deeply, a deep and sophisticated system. I'm not too convinced of that, but in the end, she did actually win more money than me, percentage-wise. So we're still looking into the science behind that. I'm not sure what it is. But anyway, so there's a bit on betting, and actually, at the end of it, I conclude that instead of becoming a professional gambler, you should probably come and work for Google or something like that, where you actually get a regular salary and can use the same types of skills. And that's it. I think lots of you have got copies of the book, and it was out yesterday. So thank you very much.
So now we'll open the floor to questions. We've got one already.
Thanks very much for the talk. How many clubs have offered you a job?
Oh, none of them. No, it's not. I mean, I've talked to clubs. It's very interesting about that, actually, because mainly I've met some analysts, and they do complain a little bit about trying to get that cycle that I described right, that it really isn't like that. The lifetime of a manager just now is, it's a year or something, so it's very difficult to get that sort of thing going in a club. Just now they use a lot of stuff for scouting and so on. But yeah, the answer to your question is none as yet. I'm open to offers.
Have you looked, you did a lot of this produces a result like this, and this looks similar, but have you actually investigated how predictive it is? So in a way a scientific experiment would be done, do it on some training data, and then see if it predicts the future? Yeah,
that's I mean, in the betting thing I used those types of predictive approaches to fit the data. But actually, it's quite interesting, because I know that you guys here, or some of you guys who'll be here, are very into this sort of machine learning type of stuff, and we do a lot of that machine learning type of stuff as well in developing the models of the fish. And then you do predictive things. But it tends to be in science that you get more understanding from sort of messing around with different types of models, trying to see which reproduce the behaviour, trying to work out if it's consistent at an individual level and a collective level. And it isn't always predictive in that way. It's more of trying to create models to create some sort of understanding. And I suppose I'm doing that in the football as well, that it's not that I can take those networks, put them against each other and predict the result of the next match. We're not really there yet. It's more about understanding where things are working and where things are not working within the club.
Hi, David. Thanks for coming. Two quick ones. So the first one is, where do you get the data? Is it some kind of public repository?
Yeah, so I've had the data is from Opta, the on-the-ball data, and that's a private company, and they collect in this data. I've been very lucky to have a good relationship with them, because I wrote for 442 magazine. They have a thing called Stats Zone, so you can go in and see all the data. I'm sure very clever people like you could scrape the data in about 5 minutes, but so it's all there. But it's owned by this company Opta, but they're very good they like to encourage this type of blog academic type of thing. So they've shared it with me, and there's a website called StatsBomb where they use this data just for non-profit analysing and having fun playing around with it. But otherwise they sell it to clubs and they sell it to the media and so on.
And the second one was your kind of mathematical prediction for the next Champions League
for
final.
For the Champions League
Not necessarily
final.
of the outcome, but how the
I'm going to write an article about this for the Mirror, and I haven't started looking at it, but I was very disappointed because it's much more fun to do an analysis of Bayern Munich than it is and Barcelona is one of my favourites. So I was at least hoping to have Bayern in the final before I start my analysis. So just now Madrid, I don't have a prediction, and I'm just trying to get over the disappointment of not having the most mathematically beautiful team in the final.
I'm just saying that I'm from Madrid, so I'm quite happy.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. So, okay. Well, which side are you on then in this?
Real.
Okay, they're going to win. Yeah.
Can you see the effect of managers? So if someone changes team, can you see that, after a few weeks, a few months, that the influence they bring to those players changes the tactics of the individual players?
Yeah, so I did an analysis on Klopp when he came to Liverpool. So Liverpool's my club. And I looked to see what is he doing this counter-pressing thing more effectively than when Rodgers was in charge. And it turned out that in the first 6 weeks, he wasn't doing more counter-pressing. This counter-pressing is where you run and try and get the ball immediately back if you've lost it in the opponent's half. Leicester are pretty good at it. And he wasn't doing this to start with, but then after about 12 weeks, he'd actually got that working, and you could see a statistically significant difference between the pressing under Klopp and the pressing under Rodgers. So that's the sort of thing that you can analyse. The idea, because the managers have such short lifetimes, they often get sacked for unfortunate statistical anomalies, really. Like they just lost 3 matches in a row, and so that's a big problem. One thing you do know is that you would need to assess these things for longer times normally than the lifetimes of managers.
Thank you.
So it seems from your graph like Leicester are playing in quite a different style to, sort of most of the other top teams. Do you think that is them having sort of broken out of like a little tactical local minimum, and that's why they've been so successful? Or more like they've just been successful in the short term because they're doing something different? Do you think other teams could copy that? Or is it just like a temporary flash in the pan?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? I think there is something to learn in there, because we can see there is a statistical difference between them. So, and what you see in football is this constant evolution. So the Barcelona team of 2010-11, there were lots of teams which tried to copy that. Like Swansea tried to do this, and Arsenal to some degree have tried to play like this. And now it doesn't work anymore. You can't attack through the D, because I think really Mourinho is credited with this. He came up with, you just pack everyone in the middle, and only Messi is going to get through that, and not even Messi is going to get through it all the time. So he came up with a defence which counteracted that. When he played against Barcelona, he let them go out to the edges as much as they wanted, because they were all tiny, so they couldn't cross into the players in the middle. So that's one thing where you see this tactical evolution. And Leicester seemed to have evolved a system that the others weren't ready to handle. And the problem with Arsenal is possibly they were actually maximising something. They were maximising, we often call this expected goals. They were maximising that shots should come from a certain area. And the other teams knew that they were maximising that. And then they started blocking it. And then Arsenal didn't do well, but they had no strategy for dealing with Leicester. So there's this constant evolution and feedback. And yeah, you will see teams copying Leicester next season, but it's not guaranteed that it will work. Something else might come along.
So you don't think Leicester will be successful next season? That's your official prediction,
this, aren't you? I mean, they could very well be successful next season. I thought that the 5,000 to 1 odds on them this season, not at the time, but when I found out afterwards, I mean, that's ridiculous odds. That means like 1 in 5,000 years that they would win the league. And it's only 20, 30 years ago since like Nottingham Forest were winning the league, and other teams, and Ipswich and so on. So no, it's not impossible. I don't think that Leicester will win, but I don't actually know who will win. I've done it in the book, and I do this study, is when experts predict who's going to win the next season. Experts their guesses are worse than just writing the league table from the season before, on average. They always have small biases where they get it wrong. So I can tell, yes, so my prediction for next season is that Leicester will win the league, that Spurs will be second, because that's the best prediction we know of making a whole league season.
So did you also do some sort of comparative analysis of Leicester before they became quite so successful? I think they were in real trouble last season, and then maybe the last 8 or 9 games they won a lot of. Have you sort of done the graphs and pinpointed the place where the style changed?
That's a good point. I haven't done that. I did last season versus this season, and they weren't they weren't doing these longer passes in that way last season. So there was a change, but what I didn't account for, is, as you were saying, is if there might be a time point during last season that they made a transition. So over the whole season, they weren't doing what they did this season, but possibly at the end they were.
Did you take a look at how single player behaves under like different managers? So let's say, for example, in a club versus like national team. So like like Vardy is like waiting for long balls basically, and scores a lot of goals in the league. But perhaps he's not the best choice for England because like the tactics is different, so they can use the strength. Whereas with Pirlo, you get always the same, right? The same in wherever.
Yeah, it's true. So I've got one example I think is nice about that is this Schweinsteiger thing. So when he was signed he wasn't really allowed to play like that at Bayern Munich like he played for the German team, and he certainly wasn't allowed to play like that at Manchester United. So I did some heat maps for Schweinsteiger at Manchester United, and he had to stay, this is your position, Schweinsteiger, you stay here and pass the ball over there, because that's the structure that Van Gaal has. So you definitely see changes in where they're allowed to do, and those tend to be instructions that come from the manager, I think, rather than them being confined to not being able to play in the same way.
Well, I will ask one more. The weather, how much does that play an effect? Different teams or different players? Did you look at that?
Question. I haven't looked at that,
Okay.
I have to be honest.
Next book.
Yes, exactly.
Any more questions? Yes.
Do you know the Football Manager game?
I know of it. I started playing it, but it was so incredibly boring. Sorry, I don't know. I had to I thought, I really have to get into this, and then it said, the youth team coach wants to know this. It was like running a real football. I mean, yeah, if you played it, it was like running a football team, which is brilliant. But I have a full-time job. I'm trying to write a football book, going around talking to people like you. Unfortunately, I didn't have enough time to really sit down and play it. But it looks very realistic. And I know, to answer, well, that wasn't your question, but one really interesting thing about Football Manager is that it was bought up by Prozone, or their scouting system, because they send people out to collect in all this information. So when you look at the Liverpool under-15s team, it is the Liverpool under-15s team. They've collected them in. Some amateurs have gone and watched the team. So there's an incredible data collection network that is inside Football Manager. It's really realistic at that level.
Just picking up on Rob's question just now, have you done any analysis on home versus away advantages?
There is home versus away advantages. Still, it's been decreasing for the last 10 years, but there still is, and there's not actually a really solid explanation of why it is. One of it is pitch size, for example. If they train on a certain pitch, there was this lovely thing where Real Madrid went through in the Champions League. I can't remember who they had, but they were 2-0 down. It was Wolfsburg, I think. They were 2-0 down on aggregate, and they just made their pitch 60 centimetres wider on both sides, which, when you do the maths, is a lot wider in square metres. And then they won 3-0 on the return visit. So you can make those small adjustments to your tactics based on the pitch you play in.
So you coach your son's football team, I believe. Has any of your research made it into the tactics you use there?
Yeah, it has to some degree. I mean, we're a bunch of dads who do the coaching, and so I'm not the only one, and they kind of... But I do the passing network stuff, and any of you who coach kids' teams or anything, you just need a piece of paper with a formation of the team written on it, and you can just draw a line between all the players who are passing each other, and you can immediately... And then some things with shots and so on. This is statistics I collect during the matches, and then I show it to them. I mean, okay, they're only 9 or 10, but they really love it. And we do things like, instead of who scored the most goals, it's like which pair of players made the most successful passes between the two of them. And it's a great way of encouraging them to do teamwork. And I don't know, I don't like to boast, but we're actually a very successful, very successful team. And we won the district championships last last year. So, and I don't think that's down to my soccermatical skills, but it's a lot of fun to try and put that stuff into the game.
Hi, thanks. So tournaments like the FA Cup are known for being very surprising and having a lot of shocks. How much of that do you think is because Premiership teams are playing lower league teams who have like incompatible networks that they don't see often? Or how much of it is just due to some kind of magic that you'll never be able to statistically predict?
Yeah, there's some of it is going to be down to that sort of thing. But the thing you have to start off remembering is that 2/3 of everything that happens in a football match is random in the outcome, and 1/3 is down to skill. And you can think of it like this. So you have 3 goals in the football match. 1 of them goes to the best team, and then 2 of them are spread randomly between the 2 teams. And it's a bit more than 1 maybe in an FA Cup match, but there's always that sort of random chance that the teams are going to go through. So you're always going to have one of those dream stories, you know, the giant killers or whatever. And probably the first thing to look at is the random explanation before you start to look at any tactical genius of these Division 2 trainers who have got them up to that level. But that's why you want to have cups and you don't just want to have leagues. But apart from this season, leagues are extremely predictable, and cups always throw up a bit more of excitement due to the randomness.
There is a chapter on Ibrahimovic, and did you find an answer why he's so successful in national leagues and he doesn't win anything in a European level, even a club?
That's a good question. No, I don't know the answer to why. I mean, yeah, it might just be, it's harder in the cups. I mean, it's the same with like Pep Guardiola has got to the semi-final of, it's this thing about Bayern Munich, that he's got to the semi-final 3 times now and hasn't won the Champions League. There is that random factor, which just means that you don't always go through. So, yeah, Zlatan has gone to like the quarterfinals 8 times or something and then not gone through. So, I don't know. I wouldn't read too much into that. I'm not a Swede, but I'm still proud of Zlatan, so I'm not going to say anything bad about him. I'll be very scared in case I might meet him one day as well. So.
I guess this is kind of related to your collecting statistics about your child's team, but you showed an 8-on-8 like passing network, kind of real time. How was that data collected, and could you kind of do that for your team, or is that professionally done?
Yeah, so that was professionally done. That was like a 17-year-olds playing, and they would basically collected that data in order to test the system, and they put 2 or 3 local GPSs on them that can collect data very locally and very accurately on their feet and on their body as well. And so that technology exists. It's not yet used in the Premier League. It was used in the Women's World Cup, for example. They all had a very accurate GPS on them. And yeah, so I did actually try it with my son's team, I have to admit. We got some GPSs and put them onto them and measured their movements, but they weren't accurate enough. So if Google are interested in funding a research project on looking at player movements, then I have some very willing volunteers who'd like to be involved.
A 20% project for someone, perhaps.
Exactly.
Lovely. Please join me and Peter in thanking David very much.